leading to the growing violent insistence for the creation of states based on linguistic factors from across the country. Jawaharlal Nehru appointed three members with Sharif Syed Fazil Ali as the chairman, Hridayat Nath Kunzru and K.M. Panikkar as the members to set up the Fazil Commission to review the demand for separate states. Finally, on 22nd December 1953, the Fazal Commission was in place. The Commission acknowledges four major criteria to consider for recognition of the states based on the languages, and the report was submitted in September 1955. The following were recommendations in brief: linguistic and cultural homogeneity, to reject the ideology of a state speaking only one language, because there are states where people speak multiple languages, whereas there are independent multiple states where communities speak the same language. For example, Hindi is spoken across North Indian states. Financial, economic, and administrative considerations, to ensure that economic, political, and administrative functioning treats all the sections of the society in a balanced manner, because the Indian Constitution stands for equal rights and opportunities for all our citizens. To acknowledge the linguistic homogeneity aids in administration, however, cannot be considered as a unifying principle, ignoring other aspects such as administrative, financial, and political preservation and strengthening of the unity and security of the nation. To promote deeper nationalism, unilingual states realize that a singular language will instill particularistic empathy, which could be countered with more positive and pluralistic measures to ensure deeper content to national feeling. Planning and promotion of the welfare of the people in each state as well as of the nation as a whole, to meet the communicational, educational, and cultural needs of various linguistic communities who either live in unilingual or multilingual communities of a particular administrative unit. Eventually, the Commission suggested the reorganization of the country into 16 states and three union territories. The Indian government accepted the report, though it made a few modifications and constituted the State Reorganization Act in 1956. After the act was passed by the Parliament and the Indian government implemented it, leading to the creation of 14 states and 6 union territories, came into existence in 1st November 1956. The states were Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Bihar, Bombay, Jammu and Kashmir, Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, Madras, Mysore, Odisha, Punjab, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, and West Bengal. The 6 union territories were Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Delhi, Himachal Pradesh, Lakshadweep, Minicoy and Amindivi Islands, Manipur and Tripura. Emergence of more states. The reorganization of states continued even after 1956, not particularly based on vernacular language after careful consideration by the Parliament. Some of the states that emerged after 1956 include Bombay Reorganization Act 1960, Formation of Gujarat, State of Nagaland Act 1962, State of Nagaland separate from Assam, Punjab Reorganization Act 1966, Formation of Haryana, New State of Himachal Pradesh Act 1970, Northeastern Reorganization Act 1971, Formation of Manipur, Tripura, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Union Territories of Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram, New State of Sikkim Act in 1975, State of Arunachal Pradesh Act, State of Mizoram Act 1986, Formation of the States of Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh, State of Goa Act in 1987, Reorganization Act 2000, Formation of Chhattisgarh, Reorganization Act 2000, Formation of Uttarakhand, Bihar Reorganization Act 2000, Formation of Jharkhand, Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act 2014, Formation of Telangana. The formation of states remains a complex issue owing to various forms of diversity such as culture, caste, religion, language, ethnicity, and even how a particular territory is geographically placed. Therefore, the undercurrent of that constant strife for a separate state lies in access to resources and, more importantly, asserting identity. India after reorganization. After 1947, during the British colonial period, there were about 600 administrative units as the principal states. Depending on the geographical, cultural, and religious preferences, people were given a choice to either stay back in the new country, India, or equally new country, Pakistan. Meanwhile, there were other countries that were formed, such as Bhutan. The current administrative units were formed between 1947 and 1950. Some places retained their boundaries from British India, such as Mysore, Hyderabad, and Bhopal. Amidst religious tensions post-independence, witnessed two nations, India and Pakistan. The independence of India led to the close of colonial rule and in the reorganization of states which were mostly based on languages and rest on based on geographical and cultural basis. Hence the new nation of India was restructured and reorganized, which instituted easier governance and administration. The reorganization of the country maintained cultural diversity, linguistic vibrancy, and glorious heritage. One of the primary concerns for the Indian government was to instill sentiments of unity and a deep sense of belonging to the country. During the national movement, Congress did take notice of the impact vernacular languages and in mobilizing powerful participation towards freedom. Immediately after independence, the same vigor translated by redrawing the map of India, which was now destined for self-governance, replacing the colonial mapping, which had completely negated the local lingual, historical, and cultural dynamics of the land. The reorganization of states and granting self-governance to the states meant the central government and the state government had to balance the powers. However, with the number of agitation that prevailed while restructuring the states based on language made it clear that the center was stronger than the states. Therefore, the process of nation building was facing a new ordeal where the country was declared independent, but the states wanted a similar consolidation based on ethnicity, geographical borders, language, and more autonomy in local governance. The key leaders who paved the way for the restructuring will include Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. However, the pain of partition and circumstances under which the participation led to justifiable concerns for the two leaders. They did not want to divide country any further because they had a vision of a more pluralistic nation, a unified state than one that should be further divided based on any specific identity that differentiates people based on religion, language, or ethnicity. Challenges after establishment of states with a few more predicate independent status as state, the political administrative history of India is placed within the democratic representation of states by legalizing their political autonomy constitutionally. Some states were large, some states were small, some states, irrespective of the size, wielded more power than the rest. Therefore, the central government had to ensure a balance maintained between the developed and underdeveloped states. This was ensured through assigning impartial supply of capital, development projects, and labor opportunities. Since the size of the states differed, smaller states raised the concerns that the larger states would have more control over resources, thus moderating or even violating the access of the smaller states to access resources. The result of such sentiments will lead to resentment, worsen the economic disparity, and assert hegemonic usurpation of resources. Post independence, the cultural, social, political, linguistic, and economic restructuring process was implemented for specific political reasons. Restructuring could not only be done with the language being the only criterion because it stood in the way of a national integration. It gave certain languages more privilege over the others, which did not go well with states whose linguistic population was lesser than other dominant languages. Therefore, structuring of states based on languages sparked a debate between national identity and linguistic cultural identity. Such communities include Bodos in Assam and the Kurgis in Karnataka. Even if two neighboring states spoke the same language, it still caused unrest concerning the assertion of national identity owing to caste, ethnic, and religious differences. Nevertheless, in 1950, 12 languages were recognized, but later 22 languages were acknowledged, which shows that growing demand among linguistic cultural communities aspiring for political identity. Prior to independence, the land was divided into provinces, princely states, and presidencies. Once states were declared, the borders had to be negotiated, especially between states such as Karnataka and Maharashtra, Maharashtra and Gujarat, Haryana and Punjab, Odisha and West Bengal, between Andhra Pradesh and parts of Madras Presidency. Apart from other differences, the dominant linguistic communities asserted their specific regional and cultural forms of power and identity. These very specific cultural and linguistic identities received patronage from the state. Here again, the state had to accommodate the cultural linguistic minorities who spoke languages other than the language of the dominant population. As expected, the dominant population started to assert their power over the minorities by imposing the language of dominant linguistic population in administration, education, employment, judiciary and economy. To tackle the cultural autonomy, development issues, and regional inequalities, states had to strategize a standard agenda that ensured overall development of all linguistic communities. In spite of the efforts by the government to ensure uniformity, two cultures emerged: the elite and the mass. The regional parties across states started to emerge because of region-based identity movements and loyalty towards one's own region. Most of the political parties were capitalized on the local basis of power. The economic inequality and regional disparity slowed down the development pace and in some cases stalled progress. When regional political parties began to emerge, it meant more challenge for the center because the problems at the grassroots were not the same throughout the country. The parliament in recent context can form a new state by removing a particular locality from any state. Therefore, a single state has the potential to be multiple states. At the same time, parliament has the power to increase or reduce the land to be allotted for a particular state. Other powers include changing the boundary and even the name of the state. However, for all these changes to be implemented, a bill will be drafted and referred by the president to the legislature of the state that is in question. The legislature of the state is granted a certain period to express their views of the state government, and then a resolution will be presented before the assembly.